Good morning, everyone. I'm opening the subcommittee meeting on Senate Bill 203 relative to the Board of Manufactured Housing. And I believe, do you have the bill itself
Yes,
as part
somewhere
of
around here.
the package? I didn't bring my copy with me. Okay. And Representative McGuire has an amendment. Have all interested parties seen the amendment?
Oh, okay. It's amendment number 1365H. I have more copies here if anybody doesn't have one. Okay. Yeah, take a couple more. There we go. Yes, and I'd like to explain this.
Yes, please.
This amendment deletes the restructuring of the board. That's partly because we weren't convinced by the testimony that the board needed to be restructured, and partly because the House position is, as expressed in House Bill 2, is that the board is deleted. So that's our position. We aren't going to mess with the composition of the board. However, the testimony did indicate that the website for the board has a lot of useful data, particularly from the early days when it was more active. And so this amendment simply tells the OPLC to maintain that website for 5 years. That's long enough for some other board, if necessary, to take over the structure, and it will preserve the data that we have. And since that doesn't cost much to maintain the website, the OPLC has agreed to doing that with no trouble. And I think that 5 years is long enough to for a successor organization, if one is needed, to be created.
Want to say anything? I would invite, I see Representative Hunt here, who actually our committee felt that this bill more likely would have gone to his committee. So I have invited him this morning to impart his experience on us. All right. Is there anyone else who would care to comment on the bill or the amendment? Okay. Let's see. We're supposed to have 5 members, so we have a quorum.
Okay, Representative Schuett.
So, do I have a motion to
Yes, I
put
made the
forward the
motion.
amendment?
I did.
Oh, sorry, didn't hear you. And would you like to second? Sure. Right. Those in favor of the amendment? Just verbal?
Aye.
Okay. So the amendment is being put forward 3-0. And that will be the recommendation to the full committee.
Right.
Again, pointing out that the board has technically been deleted by virtue of the House passing HV2. That therefore becomes the House position. And it will now be a matter of, I'm sure, discussion in any committee of conference between the House and Senate going forward.
If the Senate chooses not to delete it,
yeah,
that's
your
decision.
next step.
But in any event, as amended, this bill will keep the data available no matter what the Senate does, and no matter what type of successor organization is decided on.
Yep.
Okay, so I move on to pass with amendment.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, 3-0.
Okay.
I thank you all for coming this morning.
No.
Do you think Sherry is over in the other.
I don't know, we've got a
Just
couple of
go take a
minutes.
look, yeah.
Okay.
Be nice if we had.
Had four, yeah, a few more people, yeah, well, 3 is better than many, you know. All right, and we will exec on this in 2 weeks on Wednesday, scheduled. Good luck.
Nice talking to you. God bless you. O'Brien's not feeling well?
He's not well now.
He didn't look well yesterday.
Yeah, so we'll let him rest himself. Better he should not be here if he's feeling like that.
Yeah, he looked, you could tell.
It was not his usual ebullient self. Okay, so that's that. I'll give this to Karen. Couple of minutes before we hit the dentist.
My kids are just like, you do this outside.
Beautiful out
They
there.
were just talking about how during the pandemic, we had house sessions. Whatever.
Yeah.
Why can't we just do that? Like, what we don't have to see.
I know it's perfect. It's like, man, 81 degrees today, but I gotta be here.
I forget where you represent.
I represent Hillsborough District 32, which is New Ipswich, Wilton, and Temple.
Oh, okay.
I represent New Ipswich, like the most conservative town in New Hampshire, and, which is why I was elected. Which was why all 3 of us representatives in that district were elected, because what Wilton and Temple posted, we were losing by like 70 to 80 votes apiece. And so the next day, New Ipswich hadn't posted yet. People were saying, "Hey, sorry you didn't win." I'm like, "No, I did," because I knew before midnight that I didn't win. I said, "Wait till New Ipswich posts," and we got 2/3 the votes just with New Ipswich won. So, thank you. Yeah. Oh, it's
All right, so opening the subcommittee meeting. Oh, hallelujah.
Hi, Sherry. Okay.
So opening the subcommittee meeting on Senate Bill 147. And we had before us the amendment, which I had drafted, which we heard quite a bit of pushback on. Oh, welcome, Representative Schmidt.
You have an extra amendment?
Pardon?
You have an extra copy?
I
If you don't,
Is this,
think,
is this the same amendment you gave out at the hearing?
yeah,
It's number
This does-
1239.
that's the whole amendment. And you have your copy? Okay. Would you care to sit in for Michael Bryan?
I had been asked to come over and sit in.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Did I give you a copy of it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So do we see any part of the proposed amendment that we want to use or just go to the bill to discuss?
Madam Chair, I think this whole section is way too deep in the details. And I understand there's another bill in HHS considering this whole issue. So I would like to eliminate this whole change to the rulemaking authority regarding anesthesia. And the only thing that, as I understand it, we need to include is on the bill itself, on well,
I think what we heard was the addition of one dentist member who administers general anesthesia
That
and
makes
deep
perfect sense.
sedation should be added to the board.
right. The other
And-
thing that would be important was on page 2, line 9, subparagraph E,
Yes, permits to
for
dental
the facilities,
facilities.
yes,
And that's in the version amended by the Senate.
right. And I think that's something that the OPLC told us was important,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you end up with multiple inspections whenever a person changes. So if you get a facility permit, you just have to check that the people are there and not
Right.
deal with the inspections.
And I think the bill does need further amending per Ms. Courtney from
Mhm.
OPLC. And I don't know if I caught everything. She talked about on page 3, line 10, the fee setting, because, and I understand that that's agreeable to the dental board. Is that correct? To let OPLC set the fees, that's already in place? Yeah, okay, and,
Well, I
So-
think that yes, we definitely want to change that language, and we'll need to get the appropriate citation.
and I will just state to the folks who approached me to put forward the amendment. If my understanding is correct, that amendment was proposed to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee for Senate Bill 91. Is that pretty much correct? The issue of anesthetizing minor patients. Could you come to the microphone? Sorry, this is being recorded, so. Turn your mic off.
Representative Schmidt, he testified at the initial hearing. He's a nurse anesthetist who specializes in dental anesthesiology.
I know you said he was in. Yes, I was just texted that he said that.
We had a little difficulty with our scheduling because this is the only subcommittee that's actually working on specific Senate bills.
Yes.
The others are doing broader comment.
I can go get it. Thanks, Mark.
So I'll just state further that we kind of feel like the question of sedation should more properly be handled by a committee that deals with Health and Human Services. Our committee was to look at the rules particularly. So I think until that issue is resolved by that committee, addressing it for rules could be a little problematic if we agree to something that's
Premature.
going to countermand that. So
Yes, I'd be happy to speak to that. Actually, the original SB 147 did not contain any changes to the sedation rules. And in fact, as I understand it, the Board of Dental Examiners did not even put forth an amendment lifting the exemption until the Senate took it up, and that amendment was offered. So go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. You'd think I would have known this by now. My name is Michael Auerbach, for the record. I'm the executive director of the New Hampshire Dental Society. Normally, I do not speak to rules changes. However, we've been carefully watching this one because it's had an impact. So as I said, the original bill, which we were very much in favor of, particularly as it answers a lot of the questions by putting in a sedation provider, like an oral surgeon, like Dr. Abel here, on the board in the first place. A lot of those questions could have been answered. So if you're proposing to remove the changes to Section H altogether, I don't think we have a problem with that. And we would like to see that rule addressed with more information. Is that? And make sure you identify yourself.
I'd like to say that we agree that the details of who is where and what the requirements are ought to be defined by people with more technical background on it. We can, once they've done that, we can address the rulemaking authority, but we shouldn't be setting the rulemaking authority before they've done the technical work. That's backwards.
May I just add, I'm Dr. Mark Abel, from oral surgeon in Manchester. I live in Bedford. Another important thing that the bill does, SB 147, is it creates an anesthesia committee for the Board of Dental Examiners. Do you see
Okay.
that? You see that in
Yes,
there?
that's on page 1, starting on line 11.
Yeah, I think it's 317A2B, Anesthesia and Sedation Committee. So that's absolutely critical because right now the Board of Dental Examiners doesn't have an official anesthesia committee. So this is the first time that the legislature is officially creating that committee for the Board of Dental Examiners.
and that's basically,
Section 2.
so that would be leaving in, well, actually, all of this would be left in except for, as this was amending H.
So if I may ask, so Dr. Abel, you're supportive of the inclusion of such a subcommittee in the dental board?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we had a committee that I was on. I was actually chair of the committee for a period of time, and that committee had to be disbanded because when the dental board was audited, it was determined that that committee could not exist because it was never created by the legislature.
Well, I'm remembering exactly that point of contention when the bill was heard before us several months ago. They said, you have no legal basis to be doing this because the statute does not address this at all.
Okay.
So
Well, actually, this stuff here,
Yeah. Yeah, all
down
the way
through,
down to H, basically.
down through G, we want to keep.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to eliminate the requirement that somebody who knows about anesthesia is present while
Yeah.
that's going on.
Madam Chair, is there some possibility we could ask somebody from the HHS committee to sit in on these deliberations? Because I totally agree that we kind of got the cart before the horse here, or the cart before the course for that matter. But
Representative
in any
Schmidt,
case,
there is a Senate Bill 91, which has been re-referred by Senate Health and Human Services. And the amendment that was presented to our committee is in their possession. It was presented to them. That's what I'm saying. That, to me, is the proper place. They're looking at it, they're considering it, and I think they should be the ones to make those kinds of decisions.
I think that's very important information. I'm glad you put that out, because I agree. But the bottom line is we are getting absolutely ahead of ourselves in this committee with regard to rules, and we need to have that issue addressed before we might. Is there any disagreement on that? You joined us late, but would you like to be heard on this subject?
That was totally my fault. We were in the other room.
Well,
That's what,
we'll be happy to.
yes, thank you.
We'll be happy to.
Yes. The chair will recognize Ms. Courtney, who had made a couple of recommendations. I think we caught a couple of them, but we'd like to hear from you if you have some further additions.
Madam Chair, if you mind, I would defer to Dr. Luddington, who's here from the board.
All right.
He can better speak to the
Okay.
Yeah. This happened to me once. I went to the wrong room at Georgetown. I became a dentist.
It's never happened before, so
Yeah. I represent the Board of Dental Examiners, and I'd like to thank the committee for letting me have the opportunity to present the board's position on Bill 147. The national standard for deep sedation anesthesia in hospitals and surgery centers is to have a separate dedicated provider to administer anesthesia. Oral surgeons are the only healthcare providers that provide deep sedation general anesthesia to pediatric patients without separate providers. There are 7 national recognized societies comprised of experts in pediatric anesthesia that recommend against the single operator provider model currently used. They are the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, the American
Yes.
Society of Anesthesiologists, the Society of Pediatric Anesthesiology, the American Society of Dental Anesthesiologists, the American Society of Nurse Anesthesiologists, the New Hampshire Association of Dental Anesthesiologists. The New Hampshire board has been responsible to the public to make dentistry as safe as possible. The sole reason that I'm on the board is for public safety. I take time out of my schedule. I've been researching this for as long as I've been on the board, and so I'm very passionate about it. When there are so many experts against the single provider model, the board cannot ignore the inherent risk associated with this practice. We've investigated the impact to access to care as well as the cost analysis and found adding a dedicated provider had minimal effect on the overall picture of the surgical theater. The board voted unanimously to have a dedicated provider for deep sedation for children under the age of 8, which is a little different than what you guys have, but we came up with 8. The oral surgeon brought forth the exemption for having a dedicated provider who has had so many hours of experience in a period of time. This proposal was rejected by the Board of Dental Examiners. The issue is not surgeon's competency level or experience. It is, in fact, that they would not have enough providers if there was an emergency. I draw a comparison to Miracle on the Hudson. Captain Sullenberg, the pilot of Miracle on the Hudson, had 50 years flying experience, 20,000 hours, yet he relied heavily on his second officer during that emergency. So this has nothing to do with experience. It has to do with handling pediatric deep sedation during a adverse event.
So I believe this is exactly the type of argument that we heard, did we not, at the time that the bill was heard in our
And I
committee?
apologize for not making that, but one of the rules that encumbers the board is that we have to be voted permission to come and talk. And I was given permission to go to the Senate, but they failed to put that in the motion, so I was not allowed to attend the other meeting.
Okay.
Thank you very much. This part of what you were saying was presented by Dr. Thibault at our hearing. However, he did state when he was there that he was just representing himself. He was not authorized to speak for the
Dr.
examiner's
Thibault is very
board or.
experienced in this area. I mean, he does a vast amount of dental pediatric anesthesia. He's very experienced in that area.
I understand that, but
Yep.
like I said, we had to take him at his word. He said
Right.
he was just representing himself.
Well, I'll vouch for him.
He
How's
did
that?
cite the same groups that you had mentioned, but he was not officially representing them or the dental examiners. So I thank you for coming today. I'm guessing that you are okay with what we are proposing to remove section H from the bill.
Okay, I don't have that in front of me. Hold on, I might have it. Hold on.
Are you speaking to the amendment at the moment, Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, from the amendment, you're right.
The
yes.
amendment, okay, well, I have an extra copy if you,
Thank you.
The amendment is
The-
section A.
Yeah, the amendment is section H.
H. Yeah. Basically, we want to remove section H we want to amend the bill to remove section H. Because that's deep into who does what, and that's being.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
can we just indicate the line you're referencing so that
On the bill, as amended by the Senate, page 2, line 17, subparagraph H, which goes on down
Yeah.
through the bottom of the page and ends at the bottom of the page.
So the amendment, as far as documentation of cases presented, we're not for that.
No. We want to take out, we want to take out from the bill section H, which means we
H.
don't, H, which means we don't want to insert the section H added by the amendment either.
Doctor, you're looking at the wrong document. If you're looking at the amendment, they're looking at the original bill, so we got to get you a copy of that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're looking at the amended bill, the bill
Yeah,
amended by the
As
Senate.
amended by the Senate,
And
yeah.
my understanding is the proposal would be to completely eliminate section 8 of that amended version.
Yes, that's subsection H as in horse.
Yep. And so the way I see that, the practical impact would be that there would be a second provider required to be present because there wouldn't be that exemption to G.
Okay, so as far as removing that exemption, I can't, from the board, we're, and Attorney Courtney can help me,
Can you use it?
Sir,
I'm sorry, we just
There you go.
passed a rule change that has gone to OPLC to address this problem. So, and I'm not really.
which problem?
The problem with single provider anesthesia in a deep sedation for pediatric dentistry. I'm sorry, I should be more clear. And go ahead.
If I may, so currently the way their current statute currently reads is that they are allowed to provide waivers of having the requirement that 2 persons be present. Historically, they have always waived that provision. The board is now contemplating only waiving that under certain circumstances. However, obviously the statute trumps rules. So if the statute were to be adopted, I think as I'm reading the amended version of the Senate, taking out Section 8, that obviously would trump whatever rules that they're going to implement.
Okay, so again, I'll ask, is if we just remove section H, is that going to allow you, I assume you're going to be bringing those rules to administrative rules?
So would that mean that the board wouldn't have the authority over it anyways? Is that what it's saying?
If the situation is currently that they allow waivers,
Right, so
the board since it's a waiver, the board can decide not to issue any more waivers. I mean, that's.
Right.
Right. A statute is not necessarily required, a statutory change with respect to that issue, because the board currently retains that authority. The board currently retains that authority to issue waivers or not issue waivers.
And it was pointed out to us that previous boards gave a blanket waiver, and during the audit, it was pointed out to us that that was not a good thing to do. So hence, here we are, and I apologize for my confusion of what law versus the regulation. I'm not familiar with that.
It ain't easy.
Many other people get confused. Yeah. Well, if the board already has the authority to do this, I certainly don't want to put it into statute because it's way beyond our scope.
Yeah,
So,
and like I said, if Senate Health and Human Services feels that that's within their purview, they can come back with it next year.
they've got a bill to do it.
If I may, Madam Chair, I do think that another portion of this bill, 147, what was important to the board was the establishment of the facility license. I wasn't the person best able to articulate why the board thought that was the appropriate model, so I don't know if you want to hear from Dr. Lettington on that issue.
Well, they spoke to us at the hearing, and that seemed pretty obvious to all of us.
Yeah, I think there's no problem with that.
Okay.
You had mentioned a couple places, particularly item E, the permits for dental facilities. We intend to leave that in. And you had talked about on page 3, line 10, about fee setting.
Yes.
That should that just be, should that entire thing be deleted, or just looks
the
like
permit-
no,
you
it's
wanna have
got
the
to be,
permit.
yeah,
You just put a period after fee.
Yep.
yeah.
I think that would do
Set
it.
by the board should be deleted.
Deleted.
Was there any other section that you were concerned about besides those two?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think under that, paragraph B, with documentation of competence, we certainly don't want to get rid of that.
Okay.
And
So you're suggesting deleting item B?
no, not
Just- no,
deleting item
I'm
B.
sorry. Okay, so that's just gonna stay there then, right?
Yeah, well, actually, we don't want to make the change. We want to go through G. According to the rules through G, which includes the qualifications for deep facility license, the physical presence of somebody licensed, and which are the only changes.
Yeah, that's
So
what I'm,
so we don't want to change B. We want to leave B alone. I think.
Madam Chair, there was one other change that we would propose is that we support the establishment of the Anesthesia and Sedation Committee, but as currently drafted, it limits membership to dentists. And dentists are not the only individuals who provide anesthesia in a dental setting. So we would suggest language to include those individuals, nurse anesthetists and or anesthesiologists who practice in a dental setting.
okay.
I believe Dr. Tebow gave us some language on that. Right. One dentist member of the board and 4 additional licensed anesthesia providers.
Yeah, and I think that's in here.
Yes,
Yeah, right here.
yeah, but they're not dentists. Delete 4 additional providers,
Okay.
which,
I have a question at this juncture, whether the Senate's work at the moment, we
do we
heard
wanna delete
earlier
this
that the
whole
Senate is
sentence?
currently engaged in amending or whatever. Do we know whether, I don't want to be working at cross purposes with what the Senate is doing or duplicating what they're doing. Is there some way we can coordinate the actions of this subcommittee, our committee, and the Senate as well with regard to their bill? Because it seems like we're kind of getting someplace here with this deliberation. Your participation, the two of you, is very helpful to my understanding of where I think we should be going. But to the degree that the Senate is doing the same thing or not quite the same thing, I think we're not well advised to proceed without coordinating with them.
If I may, Representative, so originally, my understanding was Senate Bill 147 was just to deal with the membership of the board as well as to create the permit structure for facilities. At some point, language was added, which is the language in Senate Bill 91. I think from the board's perspective, it's important to address the facility issue as well as establishment of the committee. And I think because they already have the waiver authority, it's not important to include that language in Senate Bill 147. That could be addressed in Senate Bill 91 if so inclined. But I think the board does desire to move forward with establishment of facility permits.
Just as long as we're coordinating what's happening and that we're not working at cross purposes
Senate Bill
or
91
leaving
was
stuff out.
re-referred, so it won't be coming out of that committee until January.
Right.
So.
Okay, well,
they-
then let's
we will
get
tell
done
them
what
what
we,
we're doing
then
and
let's
let them
get done
know.
what we can do here.
That's what I'm,
And to the degree that,
That's- that's the idea.
that the statute already permits some of these things, I know Representative McGuire and I are both on the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which will be hearing the proposal of the dental board in the rules package that they're working on. So I think we have, sounds like we kind of are getting our feet on the ground here.
Yeah, as long as the board has the authority to issue waivers, then they're covered for whether they choose to deny all of them or approve all of them, because it's their knowledge that determines whether a waiver is appropriate. It's not ours.
I see Dr. Abel wanting
Has
to
a
make
comment.
a comment.
Ah,
Dr. Abel?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Two things. I guess I just want to make sure that the subcommittee is aware the history of Section H. So it was previously Section G. It was passed in 2018. And the reason that it was passed was because the dental board has always had the authority to give anesthesia permits to dentists. That's always been the board's empowerment by the legislature. But there was a movement in 2018 that it should be a requirement, a legislative statutory requirement, that dentists have to have a second anesthesia provider under 13, no matter what, even if the board says they can. They put the exemption in so that the board could exempt oral surgeons and dentist anesthesiologists, but no other dentist can get that exemption. Before 2018, the board could give an anesthesia permit to any dentist to give anesthesia to any age. So it was really in 2018 that it became a statutory thing where the proponents of that bill wanted to prevent the board from being able to give permits to give anesthesia to children under 13 unless they had a second
Yes.
provider. But then we got in the exemption for oral surgeons.
in By deleting this from the bill, we are not deleting it from the current statute. We are saying we are not going to change the current statute. Is that so? Does that meet your concerns?
My concerns were just that there were voices within the Senate that were adamant that the legislature should again intervene statutorily to take the power away from the board to provide these permits. So I guess when you go in,
That's in Senate Bill 91, which specifically deletes the exemption.
Yeah.
So, and they're still working on that and still fighting over it.
that's
I
why-
don't want to jump to a conclusion.
okay,
Yeah.
as long as the Senate will be in agreement with taking that part out, then
No, we're just not going to make any changes to current law in that area.
okay.
They're trying to make changes in that. And I figure we'll give them a clean slate and let them work on it.
May I just make one more comment?
The House can deal with that once they finish their
Once they finish their fight.
Madam Chair, may I just make one more comment? In general, I really like what Dr. Tebow proposed about the anesthesia committee, the composition of it. The only thing I would add is, I know we had some discussions, and I don't know how Dr. Ludington feels about this, but my understanding was there would be an anesthesia committee. It would have a chair who would be a dentist. There would be an ex officio member who would be the anesthesia provider from the dental board. And then the other 3 members could be anyone, dentist, nurse anesthetist, whomever. That was my understanding, but I don't know how Dr. Ludington feels about that.
Well, in the practical sense, I think the board, if they had an anesthesia provider, would allow that to happen. However, right now we don't. And so to handcuff the board to only allow that person to go, I think it should be amended to just have a representative from the board. And I'm sure the board would send someone that is involved in the anesthesia part of it. So they would take it upon themselves when that position is filled to do that. But right now, the way it is, if that happens, we have no one that we can send. So there is, as the anesthesia provider on the board, that position hasn't opened yet. And so it would create kind of a vacancy that we couldn't fill legally because we couldn't send just any member of the board. Having been on the board and realizing that no one's going to volunteer for that position over and above the person that's qualified, they would automatically do that. But to put it in the legislative terms, I think would if that member wasn't available, the board couldn't supplement someone else that could do that.
Okay. The bill says that it's one dentist member of the board
Okay,
who has a permit to administer anesthesia, which sounds like your petition. Then it says 4 additional dentists permitted to administer anesthesia, and the suggestion is to change 4 additional anesthesia providers appointed by the board.
no, my thing is the board member that's sent should be a board member, period, not have the board member that has anesthesia experience, because as of right now, we have 8 members, none of them have that experience, so therefore we couldn't run the committee. And
So you want to delete the requirement that the dentist
from the
board member
Right.
have that permit,
right,
and you're okay with 4 additional providers?
yes.
Okay.
Dr. Tebow has his hand up. I think we should hear from him.
May I just make one last quick comment? I apologize. I know one thing that came up at the public hearing too was, I guess, how this would be implemented. So if you pass this bill and it requires that one of the board members has an anesthesia permit, currently none of them do. So would someone be forced off the board, or would they just wait till someone resigns?
Well, we'll go with 1 board member, and then if you happen to get somebody with a permit, bring them on.
Okay. Any other
Dr.
questions?
Tebow? Dr. Tebow, would you care to?
Thank you, committee members. I know we're not dealing with section H, totally off the board, but I would like to also comment on, the section that you were just referring to, line 12, with regards to the anesthesia subcommittee, that with regards to the anesthesia. I think it's very important that the subcommittee be made up of members of people that provide anesthesia, regardless of whether they're a CRNA, a physician, a dentist, or an oral surgeon. I think it needs to be made up of everybody, because in this arena, having different perspectives, I think facilitates education, and that education would be probably very beneficial to the board when they're making decisions with regards to that. You know, Dr. Abel is an oral surgeon, myself being a nurse anesthesiologist. We have different perspectives, and I think that perspective will help guide the Board of Dentistry in decision making.
Yes, Dr. Tebow, we're considering using your language of 4 anesthesia providers because that makes sense to us. They don't need to be dentists.
Thank you.
I want to weigh in on this issue of the second provider.
Yes, sir.
I'm totally on board with the idea that you don't want to have one person only in that operating room. When something, an emergency comes, you simply cannot have only one person.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that has to be nailed down in law.
It is.
Yeah.
That's in current law.
It's in
Good.
law.
Then let's leave it.
Thank you for your time.
We're saying we don't want to mess with that section.
Can I add something? Madam Chair, one of the things that law allowed us to have a blanket exemption, which the board's counsel and through the audit was found that was not appropriate. So that's why we're making changes to the rules as it is right now, because the blanket exemption is inappropriate for maintaining the safety of the public.
Yes, sir. The law says may exempt dentists who are board certified, whatever. The interpretation that you can exempt all dentists who are so qualified is not correct. I mean,
Right.
you can't give a blanket exemption.
Right. Well,
This
we
would
were
say you could still exempt them one at a time or for specific occasions,
right.
which is.
You're absolutely right, and we were scolded on that. Although it happened prior to me being there, I still got scolded for it, which is okay. At the end of the day, we're going to correct that. Madam Chair, would you suggest us repealing that exemption as soon as possible, or wait until we have the other rule in place?
If it's inappropriate to give blanket exemptions, you should probably repeal it quickly
Okay.
and say that
That's up to their
individuals
rules, right?
may apply for specific exemption,
I appreciate your advice.
because that's
Okay.
what needs,
Okay. Thank you.
at least, although I'm not a lawyer, I only pretend to
Yeah.
be one. But it would seem to say that you may exempt them, but that's
Okay. Thank you for that.
in your skill. And that's the current law, that they may exempt.
Madam Chair? May I comment?
Yep.
As a former child welfare worker and the mother of a pediatric nurse practitioner with her doctorate degree, I would say act now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Safety of children.
So, it's looking as though
We need
you
an
and I will
amendment.
probably work on an amendment and coordinate with Ms. Courtney to be sure we've included the specifications that she's put forward, and hopefully have it ready for when our committee execs, what did you say, 2 weeks?
Yep.
So that's the plan. If folks want to pursue the case for under 8 years old, that's the purview of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. So I'm sure you'll be working with them over the summer on that bill, Senate Bill 91. And hopefully that will come to House Health and Human Services.
Right.
So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you all for your attendance.
All right. don't want to get in the weeds that much.
I'm not sure if I've got notes that I can even understand. I started with my red pen.
If you want me, I'll draft an amendment and give it to you, and if you like it, you can send it to OLS.
That sounds good.
Okay, so draft amendment. All
Yeah.
right, I think,
And I do have, I was looking for it, I'm pretty sure it was House Bill 1577 or 78 from 2018.
it
But
says
they
so
were-
right here.
Well, I just wrote that, but I had it written someplace else because I did look at it.
What's the one?
previous.
I'll make a note of it. House Bill,
It's either 15, let me just look it up in my tab, either 1577 or
In what year?
1578 from 2018. I was trying to, I knew I had it scribbled on something.
right, it's